Hello, Tim.
Good afternoon.
Get the volume up. Say something, I can hear you. Now I can hear you, okay. Didn't know if they had the volume on.
I know, I forget sometimes.
Yeah. Jeff is coming on in a minute. He just called to give me all the code words to get on. I keep misplacing them, and first he gave me the code words that I had before for the Holocaust meetings, and
Right.
so I had the wrong ones. Hold on, I'll be back in a second.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous day today. Good afternoon. Can't hear you. Still mute. You're muted. Still. There you go.
Okay, here we go. We're unmuted now.
We're good.
Okay.
Gorgeous day today.
Yes, not bad at all.
No, I mean, it's actually, I have the windows open. I'm getting some fresh air in the house.
Thank you, Jeff, for giving me that info.
Yeah, I worked. Tim uses the same one, so that works.
Yeah, it's good through the rest of this month. I don't think we've scheduled anything into January yet. I assume they may keep it the same, but Jennifer's the one who does that, so. Hello. Hello, iPhone. It says iPhone. That's
We
what
have to leave it at 1:30, Tim, so it's no reflection on you. But,
that's okay, I understand.
we gotta go.
As soon as I'm done with this, I think I'm gonna go sit out on my porch and do some reading because it's just too nice a day now.
What are you reading?
I'm reading this crazy book about the history of R&B music because I'm a music aficionado.
Oh, are you really?
Yes, yes. In my former life, before when I was in college, I was a DJ.
Wow.
So I used to have a massive, massive collection of vinyl that covered a whole wall. And then I eventually, records were very heavy and they took up a lot of space. So finally at one point, I called, I was living in Ohio, I called Bowling Green State University in Ohio, which is where I went to school. And they have a very, very big pop culture department. And I said, I have vinyl that you might want. I said, I'm willing to donate it. All I'm asking is you bring a van big enough to get it and some able-bodied young students that will haul it out and it's yours. And so they came and they took it all and put it in their pop culture department with music and film and comic books and whatever else.
Hi, Tim.
Hello. They were glad to get it. And I'm glad somebody, I thought, what am I going to do with this? I didn't want to throw it away.
Yeah.
I wish now I had kept some of it. I found out that some of it's worth some money.
That's right. Not to mention comic books, early comic
Oh
books.
yeah, people who have these things, and I didn't think at the time, so I just got rid of all of it. Oh well, it is.
All have sad stories about that.
I know everybody says as soon as you get rid of something, you're going to eventually regret because, it's like I throw something away in the kitchen and then a week later, oh, I could have used that today and I shouldn't have thrown it away.
So is it mostly rhythm and blue? Mostly
It was a collection of all kinds of things. I loved like the 50s and 60s. Like I was a huge Motown fan.
Oh yeah.
And I had a lot of that. But then when I was DJing, I was in college in the 70s, that was the height of disco. And so I had all this disco music because that's what people wanted when you would DJ. And so they used to make the disco it looked like a 33 RPM album, but it was just one song. And they made these extended mixes that you could mix in. I had a bunch of those. They don't make them anymore. And there are collectors out there who are looking for certain ones. I'm thinking, I used to own that. And you're willing to pay how much for that?
Hey, it's like the first car I ever owned. It's we got rid of it because it got old, and now that very old car is worth $150,000.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, 150,000.
If only we knew. If only we could know what people would want to collect at some point in the future, but you never know what kind of things. People have collections of all kinds of things, and I guess if you have the originals of something, there are collectors who will pay good money for it. And they have conventions and they have whatever.
Yep.
Well, I'm a stamp collector, and let me tell you, there's very little market for stamps.
I know that went out the window.
Very little market for stamps, and also my Lionel train collection. Very little market unless there's a few, very pristine collectible Lionel trains out there. Most of them are not really collectible anymore, and the hobby has really gone kaplunk because too many newer kids are not getting into it.
I was going to say, yeah, that used to be something
kind of thing. Yeah,
we used to love when we were kids and had train sets. That was really great. But you're right, you just don't hear about kids doing that anymore. Oh, all those things that we loved and have gone by the wayside. All right, let's get started here. It's 1:05. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot and commands us to study the words of the Torah. So our Torah portion this week is Vayishlach, which takes us Genesis chapter 32, verse 4 to Genesis chapter 36, verse 34. And once again, in this Torah portion, we have quite a bit of high drama going on, a lot of narrative building as the story of the Jewish people moves forward. One of the things that we see early in this Torah portion is that we know that Jacob has spent a good part of his life as an adult man in regret for the things that he did to his brother Esau. Remember that he kind of swindled and with the help of his mother, took advantage of his brother, and he has lived with that regret. So in this portion, we are going to see this reconciliation, or Jacob and Esau are going to meet again. They're going to actually have a face-to-face meeting after so much time has passed. It's a bit dramatic. We don't know what's going to happen when the two of them come face to face. The Torah tells us that Esau shows up for this reunion with an army of 400 men. So he's ready, I guess, for just about anything that could happen. We have to wonder, is he prepared to sort of, set upon Jacob and vanquish him and once and for all sort of settle the score or pay him back for the past wrongs? Certainly could look that way when you've got 400 armed men with you. Jacob, on the other hand, shows up for their reunion, for their meeting alone. He's all by himself. He's got no backup. He's got nobody with him. So we see this contrast of the two brothers. And we know that if Esau has evil on his mind or payback on his mind, it's going to probably turn out in his favor. This could turn into a story that could be pretty bloody and pretty grim. But it doesn't turn out that way. There is no sort of fight. There's no seeking of vengeance. There is no sort of payback here. When Esau sees his brother Jacob, what they happen to do is they hug, they embrace. It's really quite simple, yet it's meaningful, because all of the stuff that's in the past can kind of go to the past and stay in the past, and things can become right again between these two brothers. And, having grown up with three brothers, I understand that things with brothers can sometimes get a little dicey, and there can be issues. But here, Jacob and Esau are able to embrace and sort of put that behind them. Also in this portion, if we're looking at the narrative, Dinah, or Dinah, depending on how you want to pronounce it, I looked up and some people say Dinah, some people say Dinah, is raped by Shechem. Shechem, by the way, is the name of a person as well as a town, which gets a little confusing in the Torah if you don't know that. Simeon and Levi are very angered by this defilement of their sister, and they decide that for this act, they want to seek vengeance because this just should not have happened. This is brutal. And what they decide to do is they will slaughter all of the males that are living in the community of Shechem, and then they will plunder the city. Now, interestingly enough, the person Shechem decides that he wants to marry Dinah or Dinah, but Simeon and Levi just don't see it that way. In addition, Rachel gives birth to Benjamin in this Torah portion, and she has a very difficult time during this birth, and in fact, she dies. And she is buried near what today we know as the city of Bethlehem, which is, of course, famous for other reasons. Isaac, too, passes away during this Torah portion, near the close of the portion. He then is buried in Hebron, and then his death is followed, as we frequently see in the Torah, by a listing of the progeny of both Esau and Jacob. And of course, our narrative is now going to switch and give a great deal of focus to Jacob. I want to focus, however, this week on going back to the beginning of the Torah portion and an opening incident that happens in this week's reading. We hear the story of Jacob wrestling, and Jacob is wrestling with someone or something during the course of an evening's sleep. Just who or what did Jacob wrestle with? Well, there's different schools of thought out there. Some say that Jacob wrestles with an angel. There are other scholars who say that it was some sort of demon that had risen from the depths of the river. And yet others claim that Jacob is wrestling actually with God. Some believe that Jacob's wrestling was really just sort of a fitful dream or a nightmare, something that was disturbing his sleep. But the Torah does tell us that Jacob suffers a physical injury as a result of this struggle, which suggests to me anyway, that the struggle is in some way very real and not merely something that is going on in his mind or in his head during a horrible dream or a nightmare. And we learn in the Torah that Jacob will then indeed walk with a bit of a limp for the remainder of his life. So the injury is that serious. When dawn is finally breaking, and Jacob is awakening, he asks for the name of this being, whoever or whatever it is, and he is told in the Torah, you must not ask my name. And so we never ever get a clear-cut image of who or what this is. But at this point, Jacob is given his new name, and that new name is, of course, Israel. And that name means to struggle with God. So maybe that's supposed to be our answer here, because of this name, struggling with God. And of course, this is the name, Israel, that is going to that will come to define our people as well as our entire nation. So why this name? Why the name Israel? Why are we defined as people and as a nation to struggle or to wrestle with God? We already know from earlier in the Torah that Abraham has made his covenant with God. We know that we are now a monotheistic people. We have dedicated ourselves to God, to the one God, and this seems pretty cut and dry. And yet we are the people who struggle with God. So why is that so? Well, I'm going to give you my view, and then you can tell me yours. The way I see it, the people of faith, and I'm just talking people of faith in general, to me, in my version, are kind of always at a struggle with God. We're not content to put God in a box. We are not content to think that we have God completely figured out. At different points in our lives, God may take different forms according to what our perception is at that point. And God undergoes various guises as we strive in our lives to come to a deeper understanding of just what or who God is supposed to be. On a personal level, each one of us too may struggle with God individually. At least I know that I have. There may be times in our lives when we feel that God is entirely absent, just not there. We feel that God has forsaken us, or maybe more specifically, we have forsaken God. And yet, there may be other times when we sense that God is very, very near to us. There can be points in life when we may even doubt or dismiss the entire concept of God, that it just isn't relevant to us to even consider the notion of there being a supreme being. And just what or who is God supposed to be anyway? We are taught as Jews that we all have a one-on-one or a personal relationship with God. We don't go through others to pray for us or to talk to God for us. We don't believe in intercessory prayer. That is not a Jewish concept. We go directly to the source. We go directly to God. And we soundly reject the illustration of the old man with a long white beard. And that's what I call, in at least the way I look at it, the Sistine Chapel version of God. You know, we all are familiar with the famous painting. That's really not a Jewish concept, because we don't give God that human quality. It's just not part of us. So while we struggle with our relationship with God, we further kind of struggle with just what our personal concept of God actually is. And throughout our lives, it may go through several changes. God isn't a static concept, or at least not the way I look at it. Our version or our vision, however you want to look at it, of God is always evolving, it's always changing. Given all of that, it strikes me then that Israel is a very fitting name for our people and for our nation. And to bring this into something related to the current times we are living in, right now in our country, in the USA, we are facing very, very difficult times. And those difficult times that we are living through may further our struggle with God, or deepen our struggle with God even more. Because we are, and we have been, facing a deadly disease that has affected millions and brought death to hundreds of thousands, with no real end in sight, at least at this point. Yes, there is a vaccine on the horizon, and that is most certainly very good news. But even so, the reports of more illness, more death surround us every single day. And during this time we're living in right now, our normal routines have changed. We have altered the way that we work. We have altered the way that we play. We have altered the way that we worship, the way that we socialize, and even right now, the way that we celebrate, given that we are in this holiday season. And many of us, and again, I'll use myself as the example here, many of us long for a return to, dare I say it, the good old days. And yet we know intellectually, when we really stop to think about it, that the good old days may never, ever return. And so we struggle with our feelings, we struggle with our sense of despair, and maybe at times we even grow a little bit angry. And this might lead us to feel a bit of abandonment by God, a God who is supposed to bring us comfort, bring us peace, and bring us solace. And yet we can't seem to find any of those things sometimes right now. Is God listening to us? Is God even hearing our prayers for healing? Do we feel lost? Do we feel forsaken? All of these emotions and feelings are part of our current struggle with God, as well as our struggle with day-to-day life. Do our prayers comfort us? Do the words of our Torah, the words of our prophets, the words of our psalmists bring us peace? These are questions that we really can't answer collectively. Each one of us as individuals must answer these questions for ourselves. Only each one of us knows how our struggle with this pandemic and the fraught times that we are living in adds to our own personal struggle with God. So while each one of us is not called by the name Israel specifically, we are still part of the collective people, Israel. And because that is true, we are like Jacob, and we are bound to deal with and to intellectualize our own struggle with God. So that's what I kind of came up with as I was going through this week's Torah portion, because the notion of struggling with God is something that, at least for me, is a very real thing, has been in my life. It's kind of what brought me to where I am today. And I think the pandemic is also causing a lot of people to have some struggles with their God, their spirituality, whatever. So jump in with thoughts, comments, ideas.
Just want to get back to the narrative for a minute. What
Okay.
preceded the dream, or the battle that he had there with the angel, or whoever he's battling with? What preceded that in the text? Do you recall?
I don't recall exactly.
Was there a mention of the meeting with Esau? Did that precede it, or did that come after?
When this Torah portion opens, I believe we have the meeting between Jacob and Esau, followed by, but for some reason I did not bring my Torah with me in today, or I would look it up right now.
Because just thinking about, my own personal dreams and things like that, usually there's an event the day or evening or 2 days before that kind of trigger that kind of a dream. And I'm just wondering if his anxiety over the meeting that he was going to have with his brother was what triggered it. And I mean, there's no real commentary, is there? I mean, there's commentary, I'm sure, on what his struggle was all about.
No, I mean, it's a struggle. As we know, he has this physical result from it that seems very real. So while some people, if it was in a dream, it was enough to cause, and I don't know about you, I've had dreams at times, and like you said, sometimes precipitated by something, where I wake up and I'm exhausted. Because whatever I was doing in the dream was so taxing that it made me tired. I was so busy. I mean, I've had dreams where I'm so busy that when I wake up in the morning, I'm exhausted from the busyness of the dream. So if it was something like that, like it was such a violent nightmare or dream or whatever we want to call it, that it caused some sort of physical injury, I suppose is possible. I suppose it is. But as I said, others think there was actually a very real physical struggle. It depends on kind of whose commentary you're looking at as to whether it was real, whether it was all in a dream, whether it was angel, whether it was God, or whether it was some sort of other demonic figure. Again, there's disagreement here on that score.
We don't know really about the content of the dream.
No,
Yeah, and there's no real evidence of what his struggle was really all about.
Yeah. Jacob's character in the Torah is one that seems to be of what I see anyway, as one of the patriarchs of our people, one who lives in so much conflict seemingly all the time. You go back to, the conflict of his childhood with Esau and how they were so different, and how he was able to get, the birthright for a bowl of soup, and how he was able to kind of fool with the help of his mother, his father, and take the blessing and all of that. And he's living with all of that. And yet somehow in the Torah, God sees to it that there's this guy who is full of seemingly good deception at times, and be able to be a bit of a con man, is the one that's supposed to become a leader of our people, and not Esau. So I find it interesting that Jacob, who has done all these things, and yet Jacob was the one who enjoyed studying. So I understand from that point, Jacob is someone who would sit at home while his brother was out with the bow and arrow and hunting. He was at home studying. And so do we want a leader of our people who is more studious, or do we want one who's out hunting with a bow and arrow? Apparently God decided that the studious one. There are some, a couple of weeks ago, there are some who look at Jacob as being sort of the model for why, young Orthodox boys spend so much time in yeshiva studying, because that's what Jacob did, and so we study, they constantly study the Talmud, the Torah, and it's just, for hours, with their study buddies, their partners, and all of that. I don't know. It's just a concept. Makes sense to me in some ways. Don't all speak at once, people. Come on. I'll have to mute you.
Yeah, I think we all have to struggle with God anyway over different issues. When something happens in our lives, obviously that always triggers the struggle. And it makes you think, whether it's for good or for bad. If it's for good, you kind of bless them. If it's for bad, you kind of question them.
Right.
And, with this kind of struggle, you would think something bad is happening in the dream that's questioning, why, or by, the struggle is a fight. He's trying to, he comes away, as you say, with some sort of a real physical problem at the end of it.
Right.
So he's obviously have some kind of a real battle. We don't know even if it's with God.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of people, I just, I know for me, a lot of people when they're younger, I think particularly, or maybe when they're in college age, whatever, go through a period where they really have this sort of, I guess, agnostic period, maybe not atheistic, but agnostic period, where even doubting, that there is a God, or that there's a presence of a God. I mean, I know I went through a time with that where it didn't seem important to me, and, there's a God, really? I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. I think, and I've known, and having been a teacher, I would see young people, that I would teach going through that period of not really having any use for the concept of a God. It wasn't important to them. They didn't, place any real, thinking that I don't need God, and who even knows if God is real, or prove to me that God is real, And so I don't think that that kind of thing is unusual for people, or for a lot of people at a certain point in their lives. And then they come around later, perhaps thinking, oh, well, maybe there is something to this. I mean, and it can be something in your life that triggers this. I know for some people who put no real importance on spirituality and God, then when they marry and start to have a family, all of a sudden, oh, I'd like something spiritual for my child. And so it brings them back to a sense of God, spirituality, religion, whatever you want to call it, or a crisis in somebody's life where they felt like they needed something to hold on to. And for some people, it becomes religion and God and faith. I think we all go through different periods in our lives where we feel, like I said, very close to God, and other times in our lives when God seems really, really far away. I think a lot of people, I've heard from a lot of people, including among my own friends, that a lot of people are struggling right now because we've been in this sort of pandemic mode for so long. And a lot of people are feeling very burdened by it, knowing they have to, not saying, well, I'm just going to abandon it and go out and do whatever. But it's taking its toll, I think, on people.
I just got an email from Rabbi Mendel, who is a Hasidic rabbi in down here in Bluffton, and he's having a class tomorrow night because this Torah portion is the anniversary of the birth of Hasidism.
Oh,
In
really?
1799, apparently, I just read the short part of what he had written. In 1799, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, I don't know his name, was actually released from prison in Soviet Russia. Or it wasn't Soviet Russia, it was Russia at the time, I guess. And he was the founder. So they celebrate this Torah portion as the founding of the Hasidism.
Really interesting. Did not know that. Did
Yeah,
not.
I didn't either. So I just saw that. So it's quite a prominent Torah portion, and in their philosophy and their tradition.
Well, interesting. Well, I mean, that makes sense that they would want to do something, I suppose, special to, commemorate this particular Torah portion. So 1799 is the birth of Hasidim. I knew it was somewhere in that period, but I didn't know it was exactly
Lubavitch, yeah.
Lubavitch, yeah, the Lubavitch. But, well, I can file that away as a fact I did not know.
Yeah. I'll forward you the announcement that he sent out because it has a little short description of it in it.
Are they doing like a study session on the
I believe it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a study session tomorrow night. You can join in on it if you want. I think it's 7:30 tomorrow.
And where is this rabbi from?
Well, he's right down the road from us here in Sun City in South Carolina. So he's not the same rabbi that is over at the Hasidic rabbi from Skad.
Right.
His name, because there's another rabbi there. But he's come here. I guess he's originally from Brooklyn. His wife actually is from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They've been here about two years already, I think.
So, I mean, does he have a community there, or is?
Well, it's what he can. Yeah, he has a little community. He's in a private home. He has no shul or synagogue or anything, but he conducts services and study groups in his private home. He has a little cheder of some sort, for Hebrew school kids. I think he's even done one or two bar mitzvahs, and he has a very small community from the greater area here: Bluffton, Beaufort, Hilton Head.
Right.
I mean, not a very large community, but he does attract enough of a following, I guess, to keep him sustained.
Right. I've met the rabbi at Skad who does the Lubavitcher Rebbe there, who's very young. He's very young.
Yeah. Well, so is this fellow, yeah.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
He looks like, are you old enough to be a rabbi? The first time I met him, I'm like, you don't look old enough to be a rabbi. Not that rabbis have to be old. I mean, I realize that, but I guess he was just looked really young to me, and I'm like, whoa, good for you.
Yeah, we may sit in tomorrow night, and it'd be interesting in hearing his take on this particular Torah portion and its connection of obviously the connection is the date, but if beyond that, as far as the meanings in this Torah portion. I didn't realize there was so much in this Torah portion. There's quite a bit.
It's funny how you'll have a few of them where they're just so packed with events, moving, like I said, moving the narrative forward. And then you'll have these other portions where there's one thing, there's one event, and that's it. And then the rest, we all know that, certain Torah portions are taken up with the constant listing of who begat whom and all of that. And I always find those just not the most exciting to read and to try to study. But this is one, where there's a number of things happening. And I always seems to me, and again, this is just my own, I don't know, no real scholar to back me up on this, that it seemed like when the Torah was being put together and they were, looking at, the different, we know there are different authors, the J and the P and all of that, and they were putting it together, that they would have this and all of a sudden say, oh, we need to get things moving a little bit. And so you would get these portions where there would be a number of events, and then they would kind of back off some, and it wouldn't be, and then, okay, we need to move forward. And I don't know, maybe I'm just overthinking it, but it just seems like it sort of goes in these cycles where there'll be a couple of portions with a number of key narrative events, and then it'll kind of slow down and back off a little bit. to kind of maybe a little bit more thought. I don't know. It's just something I've always thought about.
Yeah, well, the Dina story is, I mean, to digress a minute from, the other part, the Dina story is also a little bit disquieting because of the fact that, the fellow that supposedly rapes her does want to marry her. And isn't the story also, as I recall, they invite them to some sort of a feast.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of invited to someone's home, and that's where the massacre occurs.
Right.
I remember it.
Yes. Yeah, it's very sort of convoluted because you've got this horribly brutal event, and then the idea of marriage resulting, and a celebration and then a slaughter. It's all sort of just mixed in there, and you kind of think, okay, take a deep breath, and what am I supposed to get from all of that?
Yeah.
It doesn't sit well, obviously, with a lot of modern audiences, the whole business of the rape and then the marriage, because clearly we have different thoughts about a lot of that today, and we would, if this were happening today, it would have been a very different story, clearly. So welcome, Flo.
Okay, we're going to have to go, so I'll see you maybe tomorrow night at the other.
All right, well, have a good day. Shabbat shalom.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, what else? Anybody else have comments, questions about something, or an idea floating out in space somewhere? Everybody's just kind of mellow today.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot. There's definitely a lot going on there with it. Kind of a question of, I emailed to JA. Where do you think is a good place to, to kind of find like a Hebrew teacher or some direction on that?
Oh, do you want to learn Hebrew? Good question. This question comes up quite a bit. We get some people who really want to learn Hebrew, but I don't know that right now there's anybody who is really doing a conversational Hebrew. What I can teach, what I know, and I've floated the idea at Mikveh Israel, I know enough to teach people. I can teach you the Aleph Bet. I can teach you how to read Hebrew enough to read the prayer book in Hebrew and do that. But to really get to a point of conversational Hebrew, I am not good enough for that. That is way beyond my skills. So I can ask if there's anybody that's come forth who's willing or wants to do it. We have some people who work with like the bar and bat mitzvah kids who help them with their Hebrew, but whether they're able to work with conversational Hebrew enough, that I don't know either. So that's something I'm going to have to look into. We've had a few requests, and I would be more than willing to do a class in Aleph Bet and doing the prayer book, and that, which is a beginning to at least knowing the letters when you read them. I can look at the prayer book without transliteration. I can look at the prayer book without, and read it from the Hebrew. But that's as far as my skills go. And I know Hebrew roots. So when I'm hearing somebody say something in Hebrew, unless they're speaking it really, really fast, and some people do, I can pick up at least sometimes the gist of what they're saying just by knowing the root of the word. But I am not a conversationalist when it comes to Hebrew.
Well, they have some apps. They have a lot of apps out to help you learn at least the alphabet if you stick with it.
Right. I think that's the key, is having the ability to really take it seriously and set aside time and not make it sort of put it on the back burner. You really have to be devoted to whatever language you might be learning. You have to stay with it. I mean, I was a language arts teacher in English and whatever, and I love language and I love words and I love wordplay and all that kind of thing. In my perfect world, I would know how to speak at least 8 to 10 languages.
Well,
but I don't.
Tim?
Yeah, Flo, go ahead.
All right. Some sort of a coffee shop atmosphere where people who know Hebrew can come in and have conversations with one another. Hello, how are you? Things like that to start out.
Right.
Might help. I know when I was learning French in college, we had someone who was from France who came, and we would sit down and speak to him, and it worked fine.
Yeah. Well, and that really is one of the best ways to learn a language, is to listen and pay attention to it spoken. A friend of ours who lives in Portugal and moved to Portugal not knowing any Portuguese whatsoever, has lived there 2 years. And she says, I have, just by sitting around and listening to people, and when I'm out, or when, like you said, in a coffee shop or a restaurant, or when I'm shopping, she says, I have trouble speaking Portuguese. And Portuguese, I guess, is a quite difficult language. But she says, I know enough now that when I hear it, I understand it. She says, people can speak to me and I'll understand what they're saying. It's just hard for me to actually formulate the Portuguese words to say what I want to say. So I think being around it, I know that if you go to Israel to study, and your Hebrew is not that great, they put you in what's called an ulpan. And it's just a total immersion into Hebrew. And by the time you're finished with it, you've got enough of the Hebrew skills to be able to at least do, basic kind of communication.
That's a 6-month program, Tim.
Well, they have some that are like, where it's like a quick immersion for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, just to get you up to speed enough with the basics. But, and if I were ever going to study in Israel, I would probably want to do that. Of course, first of all, we have to get the country's borders open before anybody can go anywhere and study anything,
Well,
So
another few months.
yes, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yes. I mean, there are so many, I know so many people who had trips even to Israel and other places who have been canceled because you can't go right now. You can't go. It's hard to go pretty much anywhere in the world. It's hard enough just to go in our own country with what's going on.
You can go in our own country, but from what I understand, not everybody is distancing. When my daughter flew down to see me, she said every seat was taken on the plane.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
It is. And we see, well, and then of course we saw, I don't want to cast aspersions on anything or anyone, but we saw the Supreme Court ruling in New York with the ruling between the Roman Catholic diocese and the Orthodox, who want to be able to worship and have large groups. And Supreme Court said you can't infringe on their rights to worship in large groups if that's what they want to do. And I'm thinking, I just have a bit of an issue with that. I do think that I do believe in the separation of church and state and all of that, and religion and state. But I think when it comes to a health pandemic, a greater good of the community has to prevail over getting together. Not to say that prayer isn't important, not to say that worship isn't important, but I don't want to worship with the notion that I'm going to walk out and then a couple days later I'm going to be sick. I miss the fact that we're not having services.
Mhm.
I do. We used to enjoy going to services, pretty regularly. And I do miss it. And I miss the beauty of, we have a beautiful sanctuary, a beautiful synagogue, and I miss the kind of nice feeling you could have there. But it's not worth getting sick, and it's not worth dying, we're all getting zoomed out. I think if we're all honest, we're all getting zoomed out. We're grateful for it. We are grateful that we have it because it allows us to stay in touch in some way. But I think a lot of us are feeling like I would just like to be able to get back to, having interaction with people in person and all of that. And I don't know when that's going to, happen. I really don't.
Well, my senior center started up again, and only a certain number of people can come at a time. They check our temperature at the door. We have to, they sanitize our hands. We have to wear masks. And it's a great feeling to be able to see people in person again.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know the board is looking at the possibility of, what they can do, and they're looking at other congregations. Like I said, Wesley behind us, the United Methodist Churches, has been doing, in-person Sunday services for a bit now, and looking at some of their protocols and how they're working and whatever, since they're our neighbors right across Drayton, and but then I think, yeah, that's great. But then I see these numbers that keep climbing. And I'm thinking, do I really want to put we haven't been to a restaurant other than outdoors on a patio. I will not go eat inside a restaurant at this point, still won't. You know, if it's not outdoors on a open, spaced patio, sorry, as much as I would love to, because I miss it, not going to happen right now. Not going to happen. So I think we're all, like I said at the beginning, or I said during my Devar Torah, I think it's getting to a lot of people because we miss, what we had prior to the pandemic. And then when are we going to kind of hopefully get back to that? I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have the answer. And I don't think a lot of our experts know exactly either at this point.
I understand suicide rates are going up because of the pandemic. People are just, the socialization issue is very important to a lot of people.
Right. No, it is. I mean, we are, by nature, we are social creatures. I mean, we are. And so, the idea of, the first month, the second month, even the third month, and at the beginning, we were all okay, we can do this, we get through it. I don't know that any of us knew that it was going to be lasting into 9 and 10 months. I didn't know. I didn't even think about it. And yet here we are. We're in the midst of one of them. And talk about being in the midst of one of the seasons when people gather more than ever. You start with, Thanksgiving and straight on through December and January through the new year. This is a time when people are used to gathering. Whatever holidays you do or don't celebrate, used to get invited to a lot of gatherings at this time of year.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen this year. A lot of us had to face a different kind of Thanksgiving this year than we've had in the past, So it's a new thing for us, and probably this time of year may be more difficult because we're coming upon Hanukkah. I mean, Hanukkah starts next Thursday. We're less than a week away, and then followed by Christmas and New Year. And you've got Kwanzaa and other things going on. It's just this time of year is a very festive time of year, and you have to get used to different festivities, I guess. So
Thank you, Tim.
thank you. Anybody else? Any last minute comments, questions, thoughts?
No, sorry I dropped off there for a minute. The internet connection just kind of went away, and I didn't move. It just,
We wondered.
Well, you remember the week that, my power went out in the middle of Torah study the one week. All of a sudden, yes, at power. I looked around the screen went dark and I thought, oh no, am I having computer troubles? And then I looked around, I'm like, oh, everything is out, right? And so luckily it wasn't long, but you can't prepare for things. And, the internet being what it is, we love it dearly, but it can drop out on us at the most inopportune moments. We all know that. So I understand.
Okay. Do you always have the same numbers, Zoom account for coming on here?
The Zoom account for the Friday Torah study is the same through the end of the year. Jennifer, when she set them all up for the rabbis' classes, for the Torah study, whatever, she made them through to the end of December, which of course we're coming upon. Now, I don't know what she's going to do when she starts reprogramming, whether she's going to keep it the same or whatever. I think it would be sensible to keep it the same, but we'll have to wait and see.
Right. Tim, your class notification came in today at 1:11. So
Yeah, it was late.
Yeah.
right, 1:11 was my notification, but
Well, okay. I know that's not,
I sent you an email asking if there was a class.
Right. I really would like it to go out on Thursday. I mean,
that'd be great.
Because I always make sure that I have anything, but this is my background as a teacher. I respect deadlines. When they tell me something needs to be in by such and such a time or date, I get it. Like when Jill's putting the contact together, and she says, I need your stuff by such and such a date. If you've got something to go in, I'm usually a couple of days ahead of the deadline. But that's me. That's how I operate. I can't control how other people operate, but I have never been in my whole life, even when I was a child, I was never a good last minute person. That did not suit me well at all. So I was one of those people and I'm not late. I am not late. When somebody tells me I'm supposed to be somewhere at 3 o'clock, I make sure that I'm there by like at least 5 till. I'd rather be a little bit early than late. But again, maybe I'm a little bit OCD on that. I don't know. But that's me. What can I say? Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tim.
I wish you all Shabbat Shalom. It's a beautiful day. Hopefully everybody can enjoy a little bit of it outside. We had a few really, really cold days, but today is really, really lovely. I know I'm going to enjoy my porch and some reading on the porch because it just sounds like a really good thing to do today. So everybody have a great weekend, a great week. And happy Hanukkah, because I won't see you probably before Thursday evening. So have a great Hanukkah, beginning of Hanukkah, and then we'll be in Hanukkah next Friday.
We're celebrating it at my senior center.
There you go. Good.
You have a class Thursday evening?
Thursday, do I? No.
Yes. No. Okay.
No,
Because
no.
you said you won't see us till Thursday evening.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The Holocaust.
No, Thursday evening is the beginning of Hanukkah. So when we have Torah study next Friday,
Oh,
we will have already lit the first candle, and we will be in the midst of the 8 days of Hanukkah at that point.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
No
Have a
problem.
good day, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.